If you watched my last video, you know we talked about mise en place and how important that is. So, here we go. This is the mise en place for these biscuits. As you can see, we're using two types of flour. We're using all-purpose flour and we're using cake flour. And you may also notice that we are using lard in this case to make these biscuits. Both of these decisions I will come to regret later. Why two kinds of flour, you may ask? Well, cake flour has less gluten, so it should make our biscuits lighter and not as chewy. But we still need a little gluten to keep the whole thing together. At least that's the theory. As for the lard, according to the Webster Store blog, the melting point of lard is lower than butter, which means that more air and steam are released during the bake times. This results in a greater leavening and a flakier texture in baked goods. Lard also has larger fat crystals that leave open spaces as they melt, creating more layers than you would achieve with butter. For biscuits and pie crusts, lard, or a combination of lard and butter, produce the ideal texture. So, when it comes to biscuits, unlike Friends, flaky is good. That last little bit wasn't on the blog. That's pure Dawn. So, after adding the flours, baking powder, and salt, rub in the lard. If you have a pastry cutter, now's the time to use it. If you detest unitaskers like Alton Brown, your hands are the most versatile tool in your arsenal. Unless you don't have hands. But if that's the case, use your cyborg powers. Just don't be evil and take over the world like Google has. Okay, weird tangent. Back to rubbing. By using your hands, you ensure that lumps of lard remain. Unlike your mattress, you want lumps in your dough. When the lard melts during the cooking process, it leaves little tiny holes, making the biscuits lighter, and lighter is better. Sadly, biscuits do just the opposite for my weight. Once the mixture looks like lumps about the size of corn kernels, it's time to add the milk. Again, using your most versatile tool, bring the flour and liquid together, but beware of overmixing. Again, a good biscuit is a celiac biscuit, and gluten is the enemy. The dough should be somewhat sticky, tacky, and not at all elastic. Roll it out onto a floured board about 1 inch thick. Oh, and I should probably remind you the rolling pin needs to be floured too, otherwise your video looks really unprofessional. Okay, so roll it out onto a floured board with a floured rolling pin about 1 inch thick. My assistant doesn't know how big an inch is, which will turn out to be yet another thing I will come to regret. Cut the biscuits by pressing straight down. This keeps the edges from sealing, which will allow them to rise to their full potential. Remember, as Zay Frank says, no twisting. Re-roll any remaining dough, but be gentle. Every time you mess with it, the dough gets tougher, like that quiet kid in elementary school. One day he's going to join the Marines, and you better hope he forgets about the bullying you gave him. Now, transfer the cut biscuits to a baking sheet lined with parchment and bake at 350 for 25 minutes or until lightly browned. Now for the best part, the gravy. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm a fan of a good biscuit, but for this dish, it's really just an excuse to eat cream of sausage soup. You'll see what I mean. This recipe is probably the biggest bang for the buck I make. There are literally 3 ingredients, not counting the salt and pepper. 4 if you have to add sage because you couldn't find the correct sausage. And it's probably my most requested recipe. I think people are let down when they see how simple it is. Never meet your heroes, kids. You'll be disappointed when you realize they're only human. So the first step is brown the sausage and break it apart. You'll want an even consistency. Unlike the biscuits, lumps in gravy is bad. The sausage should have released some fat and moisture. This will allow you to stir the flour in and make sure there's no dry spots. Unlike the chowder, we're not using a roux here per se. Instead, we're using the fat from the sausage to incorporate the flour. The ratio remains the same though, 1/4 cup of flour to 1 quart of liquid. Because we're only making a half batch, we're only using 2 tablespoons. Stir the flour into the sausage until there's no dry flour remaining. It should actually look like there's no flour at all. Cook this for just a little bit to help get rid of the raw flour taste. Then it's time to add the half and half. Just like before, you can heat the half and half before pouring it in with the sausage, but I didn't this time. I just added it slowly and let it come to temperature before adding more. I find this ensures no lumps. And I'm lazy. If you're using fresh sage, put it in while the gravy thickens. Don't worry about fishing them out later, they're edible. Just tell your kids that whoever finds one is the winner. My mom would do this with the whole bay leaves she put in her chili. For some reason, no matter how many times we won, we never got any prizes. Now that the gravy is thick, it's time to season. If you're using dried rubbed sage, you'll add it here along with the salt and copious amounts of black pepper. Did I mention that I love black pepper? Because I do. As before, you better taste it before you serve it. Just don't keep tasting until it's all gone. Save some for the biscuits. Speaking of biscuits, do not, I repeat, do not make them like I showed you in the beginning. They were bad, and I regret every life decision I ever made while preparing them. So, as a special bonus, I'm going to make biscuits that you'll actually want to eat. Stick around and please give me a chance to redeem myself. So, right away you notice something different. Where's the milk? Well, since I don't use buttermilk fast enough to keep it in the fridge, I buy buttermilk powder, and let me tell you, it works great. Just make sure you vacuum seal the jar after you use it, otherwise it will clump and turn hard as a rock. You do have a mason jar vacuum sealer, don't you? So, back to biscuits. Turns out the secret to a good biscuit is all in the technique. The fat needs to be cold and separate from the flour. If you incorporate it too much, you end up with a pie crust, not a biscuit. Well, the baking powder makes the biscuit too, but still, you gotta keep it separated. To accomplish this, I grated frozen butter and tossed it with the dry ingredients I'd mixed together previously, because butter is delicious. Make a little well in the flour, just as if you were making muffins. Add the water all at once and start bringing it together quickly, and as soon as it's all mixed, stop. It will be sticky, shaggy, and nothing at all like bread dough. Seriously, work the dough as little as possible. I can't stress this enough. This is how it's supposed to look. Place it on a floured surface and prepare for the next important technique, the fold. Notice how I'm spending as little time as possible rolling the dough, just enough to fold it over and roll again. I think about 3 turns should be enough. These folds help make the biscuit light and flaky. Now, pat it into shape. Cut as before, straight down. Yeah, I twist at the end, but by that time the biscuit's inside the cutter and it moves with the twist, it doesn't seal. Cut me some slack. As before, collect your remnants, pat them together gently, and then make some more biscuits. Same scenario, onto the parchment and into the oven, but this time it's 425 for 15 minutes. As always, lightly golden on the peaks, but still white in the valleys is what you want. Don't burn your biscuits. There, perfect. There's only one thing missing. Butter. Because butter is delicious.